And tonight, a lot of consequences could come with lifting Title 42, that public health order that has blocked nearly 2 million asylum seekers from crossing the border since the start of the pandemic. Ruben Garcia, the director of a network of migrant shelters in the El Paso area, says his sites are often full. And since there's not enough volunteers, he says he'll be forced to shut down one of his biggest shelters by the end of July. He says he thinks the federal government's immigration system is too dependent on non-governmental organizations like his. NBC's Julia Ainsley has the latest.
We're inside a migrant shelter in El Paso, Texas, where hundreds of migrants are taking refuge after crossing the U.S. Mexico border. From here, they will travel into the U.S. to pursue their immigration cases.
You've got New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, gosh, all over Ohio, Florida. This is all over the country.
Correct.
Ruben Garcia runs Annunciation House, a network of shelters in the El Paso area where he says up to 650 migrants can stay while they arrange for transportation further into the U.S. The federal government depends on shelters like his to take in migrants who might otherwise end up on the streets.
I give Border Patrol and ICE an idea of how many available cots we have for the next days.
Garcia is worried about what will happen when COVID-19 border restrictions, known as Title 42, eventually lift, and is calling on the Biden administration to step in.
There are thousands of people that have gathered on the Mexican side of the border that are waiting for Title 42. It's going to look, I think, chaotic, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Garcia says Border Patrol often has more migrants to release than he has space to take in.
I think the federal government is very dependent on the NGO network across the entire border area.
He worries because the shelter we're touring now is scheduled to shut down at the end of July.
Since COVID, it's become very challenging to find the volunteers to help staff facilities that are this large.
Peter Jaquez, the deputy chief of Border Patrol in the area, says they send as many migrants as Garcia can take.
We do maximize using Ruben Garcia because he does tremendous work.
He says he has alternatives, like sending migrants to other border sectors.
We have flights that will take them to a detention center in another city. We have flights that will take people to another processing center on the southwest border.
Back inside the shelter, we meet children playing soccer and riding scooters, eager to see what life in America has in store for them. And Garcia introduced us to two women, Jimena and Alexandra, who asked us to conceal their full identities because they're afraid of the gangs they fled in Colombia.
She says that they started asking for extortion money for the boy. The father wasn't able to pay for it, that the father was disappeared.
For now, Garcia is continuing to help the migrants in his care. He offered to pay for these women to travel to Chicago and New York.
Julia is joining us now live. Julia, I'm glad you're with us to talk about your reporting. What are the plans, right, for when places like these shut down to actually shelter some of these migrants?
Well, it's interesting. We also started reporting that we've heard, because we obtained internal DHS documents, that there are plans to take migrants from overcrowded cities, potentially El Paso being one of them, and send them further into the U.S. to another shelter networks, like in places like Houston, Dallas, Albuquerque, and actually starting with L.A., Hallie. But that takes planning, and people I've spoken to say, look, what's easiest is to use the resources that are right there at the border. But NGOs across the country, those are those non-governmental organizations like Ruben Garcia's, they depend on volunteers. And since the start of the pandemic, they've had fewer and fewer volunteers, especially because so many of them may be elderly, retirees, people who would be really impacted if they came in close contact with the virus. And so now Ruben's looking for other locations. He does hope that the federal government will increase its response, increase its planning, so that migrants aren't so dependent on shelters like his, and that they do get the care that they need before they go on to their final destinations to pursue their immigration cases. Hallie.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.